It's the day where Deshaun Watson settles 24 of his 24. 20 of his 24. Potato, right?
Right.
24 of his 24 civil cases. Big day for Deshaun Watson, I suppose.
Well, I mean, yeah. If he's trying to get as much off his plate as possible so that he can try and get back on the field and get all this behind him, at some point you had to do something. I think that the most amazing part of this was the man that has been so boisterous about we will not settle, we are not giving in, these women are not about the money. Tony Busby was the guy that basically announced in a press release or a statement that said they're finishing up the paperwork, but that 20 of them are behind. They're not going to release the finances. They're not going to release the details.
Somebody will leak it eventually.
Yeah, and you got to believe if the rumor was that I think the minimum was 100,000.
See, like Deshaun was also very adamant about clearing his name too, though. So like the Busby side of it, where he was like, "Oh yeah, we're going to go all the way to court," in which four young ladies still have not had their cases settled, so maybe that will still end up to court. The threat of going to court is still there, which is why it's kind of fascinating to me. Why the 20 over the 24? Like, I understand that you want to cut down the number, that you want to cut down the volume. It's easier to get 20 of the 24. If your goal is to settle all of them, then you start, eating the elephant one bite at a time, right? But the threat of court is still there. So, like, it's fascinating to me in that front, like how the NFL is going to view the settled cases versus the non-settled cases and still the overall amount. Like, we know that there was 24 right now. There could be more. We know that at one point in time, there was 24 civil cases filed against Deshaun Watson. There's currently 4 because 20 of them have been settled. Like, do you think the NFL is going to view those differently? Like 24 unresolved civil cases versus 20 settled civil cases and still 4
I think
unresolved.
Rusty and Deshaun are under the belief that once they're settled, they are off the ledger and that there's nothing to discuss, as if almost nothing ever happened.
But the NFL is not going to view it that way.
You hope not, but you don't know because the NFL is so volatile in terms of how they make decisions and the way that they go about their business and everything that we've heard in terms of the lack of depth when they went to talk to all these victims and talk to all these people involved in the process. So I would tend to believe, side with you on that, and I want to believe that, but you just don't know. I do believe from Watson's camp's perspective that they believe that the settled cases mean that no harm, no foul. Nothing was ever done, damn it, there was nothing ever proven that he was guilty on. Sure. They expect to be able to walk away from them.
No, that to me is the difference between like living as a human being and playing in the NFL. Because I do think that you're right. Like trying to predict what the NFL is going to do is a crapshoot. Like it is very volatile. And you've seen the cases. There's nothing really similar to Deshaun, but we've seen other suspensions for cases that didn't get to criminal court, that were civil allegations. We've never seen the volume of Deshaun Watson. So it is very difficult, I agree, to figure out what the NFL is doing. But whenever I heard like the settlement, like the first thought that came to my mind is like, okay, well, why 20 of the 24? Like you understand that there's still communications with the other 4. I'm sure they're still negotiating. I understand that you want to cut down the volume of how many there are. Eat an elephant one bite at a time. But you still have the threat of court that's looming if you don't get the settlement done with the other 4. It's interesting to me that it's not the mindset that Rusty Harden had, remember, after the November 2nd trade deadline where it's all or none. They had this all or none mindset for a very long time, but now suddenly they don't. And my biggest takeaway from all of this as to why they suddenly don't, I believe that there's a deadline coming up. I feel like the NFL is going to announce their suspension very soon. When was the last time that Deshaun Watson was close to getting a settlement deal done with any of these women?
Dolphins.
The November 2nd trade deadline. Why did they all of a sudden feel pressure to get a lot of those settled? Because Deshaun Watson wanted to play football. Because there was a trade deadline that loomed. Right now, I think that there is a deadline looming, and I think that deadline looming is the NFL about to drop the hammer on Deshaun Watson over the next week or two.
I mean, it's quite possible. I think that the interesting thing to me is that of the 4, I believe that Ashley Solis is one of them. And sure. I believe she was the first one to come out, and she was the one that said, this is far greater than about the finances. This is about the being the victim and what she went through and wanting him to pay, literally, but also to pay in the court of public opinion. So all it takes is one. We've said this all along. It only takes one. As much as Busby has gotten his name out there and represented all these ladies, and he made the statement too, not any one of them is about the financials. But at the same time, if there is one that is going to make a stand and make sure she sees it all the way through, you would believe it's her. So as much as Deshaun tries to clear the ledger on everybody else, it's going to be real interesting if and when she decides to settle, because if she doesn't, no matter what else he does, the damage is still going to be done, and it's going to be done even further.
Hey guys, back to the video in just 1 minute. Before that, I want to tell you about Fitz Roofing. Fitz Roofing is dedicated to the loyal people of Houston, Texas. That means if you got a leaky roof or need a full roof replacement on your business or your home, or you want to get something done around the yard or maybe something around the house, they have the best warranties in the business, the best ratings, and the best service. They're going to take care of you every step of the way. Fitz Roofing, making a difference, one home at a time.
That's to me why it's curious where it's not the all or none mantra that it seems like Rusty Harden and Deshaun Watson have had for quite some time. Remember, Deshaun Watson, as recently as last week, talking at minicamp, saying that his intent was still to clear his name. And look, I understand. Like one of the sayings that I hear a lot in regards to the settled cases, 20 of the 24, is that settlement is not an admission of guilt. We understand that. And we also understand that Deshaun Watson's not being criminally tried currently, and the chances of him being criminally tried are probably very, very, very unlikely unless there's new information, new evidence that comes up. You got no build in Harris, you got no build in Brazoria, and we all listen to the Mike Meltzer podcast talking about the fact that, look, that's not also what's the word I'm thinking of? I can't think of it off the top of my head. But it's not an admission of innocence either whenever you get no build. It's just that they don't have the evidence to prove it, which we understand that in the Deshaun Watson case. So I'm just trying to figure out why all of a sudden Deshaun Watson and Rusty Harden, their team went for it's either none or it's all, to now all of a sudden they have 20 of the 24 cases coming done. We've read the tea leaves that the NFL commissioner's office from various reporters around the NFL that they want to get something done. I've read that they could get something done around the July 4th holiday. So the fact that I've read that, I've heard the tea leaves on the fact that suspension is coming maybe at the very beginning of July, and now all of a sudden 20 of the 24 cases get settled, throwing in the fact that the last time Deshaun Watson was close to settling with a lot of the women was on the November 2nd trade deadline. My biggest takeaway of this story is that the NFL is about to announce their suspension over the next couple of weeks.
Okay. Well, you know what? I think that they'd like to. I think as much as, and I think I use this from a Texans fan's perspective, right? At a certain point, you just wanted it to be behind you. You wanted it to be over. It was that never-ending black cloud of negativity that brought you down every time you wanted to be hyped about the Texans draft or the Texans upcoming season or adding youth in the rebuild, and you couldn't get away from it because of everything that was still lingering. I think the NFL sees this as a huge stain, and the quicker they can try and put it behind them, the better. And I think in a lot of ways they've tried to do that so much so that it was kind of callous in the way they went into their investigation and careless in the way that they didn't do the kind of in-depth that a lot of people, including Tony Busby, were expecting them to do. But at the same time, from a massive marketing juggernaut that the NFL is and imaging, they want this thing to be in the past so that they can move forward from it as soon as possible. That's why they, as much as they know they misstepped with the Ray Rice and having to go back and make a second decision after the video came out, they're going to try and get this done before the start of the season.
And I think the NFL would love the idea if nothing else can come out of this, right? Like 20 of the 24 that have settled are also, putting together an NDA where they can't speak of the subject. So the NFL is going to want that with all other ones. But that's kind of why I'm confused of okay, you got 20 of the 24 done. There's progress there, but you're still not all the way to the finish line. Like if you're trying to, tie up loose ends, you've not tied up all the loose ends. And to me, 4 is just as great as 24. Because if just one of them gets to civil court, that can be damning for Deshaun Watson, just like 24 was. So that's why I was asking you the question earlier. And I know that the NFL is very difficult to predict what they're going to do. They are very volatile. All of that is true. But I wonder how the NFL and Roger Goodell look at this. 20 settled cases versus 4 that are still ongoing versus 24 that are still ongoing. Because to me, it's add them up. You still have 24 sexual misconduct cases, settled or not, on either side of the equation. Like, this to me should not factor into the suspension of Deshaun Watson.
What else did I tell you, Jeremy? After the last article, we identified 66 massages. It might even be more. But we knew, at least to kind of put it in perspective, we knew that there were way more than the 24. So now, if I'm one of those in-betweeners, if I'm like in the 30s, right? I'm one of those 30, I'm in one of the first 35 massages. therapist, but so far I've said I've got no problem with Deshaun. I'm not saying anything.
Right.
But all of a sudden I read SportsCenter, the website, or I see SportsCenter today, and I see, oh, wait a minute. 20 of these women, just for doing a massage and doing it a little dirty, got paid that much money. Now maybe I'm just saying from the
I
standpoint.
feel like that could be a
I'm
little
just saying-
misleading there, because I mean, there's a lot of these women's feelings are like are one very valid and we should take
Absolutely.
for merit. So like,
But I'm saying if you're out there, and maybe you were one of the 15 that initially said Deshaun didn't do anything wrong, but the one thing that the NFL and Rusty and Deshaun can't prepare for is they can change their mind at any time. And of the 66 or more, though 15 supposedly were okay with everything, okay, so now we got 51. We've got 24 in which 20 are off the books. That doesn't mean that somewhere in between after 24 and before you get to 51, some of these other women are going to go, time out, wait a minute.
yeah, I saw the statute of limitations on this like runs up like I think it was either March or May. So like the fact that there could be more cases is could happen.